So we made it. Here's the final session of SIGGRAPH. And so here is the one and only Noseman. You've been waiting for him. Here he is. I believe you're going to be covering simulation in cinema and some other few tricks and things like that?
Yes, so just simulations. This is the second installment. My name is Athanasios Pozantsis, at least as far as my family is concerned. And for everyone else, it's Noseman. If you Google Noseman, I come up first. Yeah, that's, I think, the single most important achievement in my life.
Well, that is something to Google, because Noseman has got some amazing information, not only on this session, but on the many, many, many sessions that you've run before for us. So
yeah, I do.
Take it away.
Thank you very much, Simon. So I work for the training team, Maxon Learning and Training team, and I'm surrounded by great people, so the standard of my performance has to be really, really high. So anyway, the first presentation, which you can catch online, was talking about certain things about cloth simulations. And we're going to take it, we're going to start from where we left over, where we left off. And what I'm going to do, we have this zombie character, which is just an Alembic file that's been cached. And in the previous session, I created a little shirt by getting some of the geometry and changing some things. And now he's wearing a sweater. Zombies wear really nice sweaters. So how are we going to enhance this? Now, in this particular case, I've already done it. So I'm going to remove the stuff I've done. And you can see here that the cloth is rather uniform. It has a particular bendiness and a particular stretchiness. And the bendiness is how soft the cloth is, and the stretchiness is how stretchy it is. So we are going to use vertex maps, which is defining points and polygons on the surface with a value. So it's a very simple thing to do. I'm going to start with a polygon selection, and I'm going to go, I've made these selections already, and I'm going to show you how I did them very quickly. I'm going to select a loop around here. I'm going to select a loop around here. A loop around here. Whoops, undo. Just need to zoom in. There you go. I'm misclicking. There we go. And one around the neck. I would say this one. So what I want to do is select everything between these boundaries. So go to Select, Fill Selection. And there you go. I can just click here and I have these polygons selected. How do I assign a value to these now? Well, if you control click on the point when you're in polygon mode, it converts that selection from one type to the other. And then we have to say, go to the select menu and set the vertex weight to be 100 for the selected points. Now we see this indication of yellow, which is a value of 1, and red, which is a value of 0. And if I want to use this vertex map for something, whatever I do with it is going to indicate, it's sort of a point mask, so to speak, with values from 1 to 0, 0 to 1. Now, I am going to name it, and this is a habit you need to acquire, because vertex maps are used quite broadly in simulations and many other things. It's good. The way we attach these vertex maps is by name, and the default name is always vertex map. You can cause certain conflicts if you forget to change the name. So I'm going to call this floppy. And what I want to do is make my fabric more floppy where it's a value of 1. So we go to the cloth and we say the bendiness and the stretchiness are those two parameters. Let me delete the previous one. This was the previous one I had, the one I removed. And what we are saying here with this vertex map is that whatever is a value of 1 is going to get the maximum bendiness. Whatever has a value of 0 is not going to get any bendiness, so a value of 0. And you can always go and adjust these by double-clicking. We can go and do adjustments to the values of these. So we're not only constrained to 1s or 0s. We can blur this if you want. We can smooth it. So you can go here and apply smoothing. So we can create a sort of a tapering of the values. And we can use vertex maps in a very large, many areas in Cinema 4D. So we want the main body of the cloth to be floppy, while the rest to be a bit more rigid. Immediately, you will see that these areas here are slightly less floppy, but that's really not enough for the effect I'm trying to do in this particular case, because I want the fabric to sort of stick on my little character. So the way to circumvent that is I'm going to go to the friction, but for the friction I want the opposite. I want the maximum value to be on the sleeves and the waist. So the easiest way to do that is to make a copy of this, invert it, so it will invert the values, and call it something else. For example, friction, and go to the cloth and say I want my friction to be rather high where that value is. Now if we want to visualize vertex maps, this is sort of a side thing without clicking on the tag itself. What you can do, you can create a material, and I'm going to go and remove this material. And in that material, you set a vertex map shader. In that vertex map shader, you can drag any vertex map. Let's put the floppy. And this creates a black and white shader where the ones are indicated as white and the blacks as the zeros as black. But I want to colorize this, so the easiest way to do that is on top of the vertex map shader to go and add a colorizer that's going to remap the left to the blacks, the right to the whites, but in this case nothing has changed because I can always go and remap this to different colors. So now we have the gradation from 0 to 1 mapping to this gradient. So you can use the same information we're going to use for the simulation to do colorization and stuff like that. Let's see what our character looks like. And you can see now that his sleeves are sticking on his forearms. Now you would say, why is he so floppy overall? The reason is, as I explained in my first presentation, which you can catch online on Maxon's YouTube channel, Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, or Maxon, it's the 3D Motion Show, sorry. It's recorded there. When a simulation object, a cloth object, has a lot of polygons, it's by definition more floppy. To counter this, we have to go and increase the settings. It's going to be slower, but we're going to get a bit more rigidity. So now you can see that the sleeves and the waist are a bit more rigid while everything else flops down. And let's see what happens if we increase this to, let's say, 50 and 50. And you will see that it sags even more. Of course, I can destroy it that way, but you can see now the full effect. Now, having said that, let's go and do one more thing. I'm going to just make it a bit more rigid. And let's go to the settings and make a bit faster. So, there we go. Excellent. You can go and apply 2 or 3, any number of layers of cloth. This is not a limit. Many people see a garment over a character and assume that that's sort of the limit. No, you can stack as many as you want. So let's just add one more layer, because you can always wear sort of a t-shirt over another shirt, right? Why not? So I'm going to do the following thing. I'm going to use exactly the same object I used earlier. I'm going to make a copy of this, and I'm going to go and just delete everything from here, and I'm going to hide the other stuff so I can focus on that shirt. First of all, I want to change its density. So let's go and remesh it into something which has a lower polygon density. And it's going to do its little calculations here. And I'm going to go to my remesh and say I want fewer polygons. Give it a second to calculate. And this is what we know as Z remesher. Perfect. Right click and say current state to object. We have now a fixed baked object with that resolution. Let's turn everything else on. The other one. Let's take this and push it outside slightly. Again, it's very simple. You go to your polygons, you right click and you say normal transform. The normal transform will move every polygon in its normal direction. So let's move it. Let's just click and drag. There you go, just slightly bigger. And let's go and remove some parts of this so it's a bit fancier. So let's go to the neckline and let's go to the arms here and do pretty much what I did earlier. I'm going to use my fill selection to fill this, then I'm going to invert it so I can delete everything I don't want. This is exactly how a Photoshop mask would work. And there you go. I can take this and right click and say in my simulation tag cloth, and now I have cloth over cloth. And you can keep stacking and, you know, make a nice little suit and all that nice stuff. Now, just because I could just close down the file, shall I save it? I'm not going to save it. We're good. So let me read my little, these are my notes, my cheats. Let's do one more thing. Let's add some accessories to the zombie, because, you know, zombies love accessories. And for that, we're going to use the rope simulation, which is exactly the same engine as the cloth simulation, but it works on splines. And let's just make a circle. Let's make it rather small, 10. I'm going to get my move tool and move it around. I want to put it right here, so I'm going to use my Shift S to activate my snapping. There we go. Just put this guy somewhere here. Lovely. Turn off my snapping. Don't forget to turn off your snapping. If you want to see what you're doing, press P, click here to undock it. Whenever, this is my preferred workflow, so you can always see if snapping is enabled or disabled. So let's scale this down a bit. Navigate around. There we go. And let's put this here. And just like that, we have a circle. Let's right click and add a rope tag. And now he's got a bracelet. And okay, one bracelet is good. What is better than one bracelet? Many bracelets. So let's go and add a cloner. And I'm actually going to add the cloner exactly as a parent of this circle, because I have the rotations and all that. So add the cloner here. Tell the cloner to be in linear mode. Let's generate 5 of these and move them in the Z direction because it's blue. So there we go, 5 bracelets. There we go. And move the rope on the cloner. Rewind and press play. So now he has many bracelets. And because this is fun, what I'm going to do now, just because I can, this is a great thing about Cinema 4D. You do things because you can do them. At least that's what I do. Sorry, I don't know if other people are like that. I'm going to make a little 2 centimeter sphere. I'm going to add yet another cloner as a parent. I'm going to set this cloner to be in object mode. And as the object, I'm going to use the previous cloner, which is basically these little things here. Now, what I'm doing here is sort of a fake, in the sense that you will see that the simulation is going to work. Well, it ought to work. Let me do this one more time. Yes. I'm going to go to this and put it under a connect object. So it consolidates all these splines into one object. And I'm going to grab it and put the connect object there. Sometimes, just sometimes, you need to do that. Now, what you're seeing here is there's no simulation on the spheres. There's only simulation on the spline. But because the little pearls are on the spline, if you make them small enough, you won't be able to tell the difference. So you can do a very cheap sort of simulation of beads and stuff like that just by simulating the splines. And of course, you can make a necklace, right? That's the highlight of this, and all sorts of other accessories. So there you have it, rope simulations, as simple as just dragging a little tag and then using that spline. In any context, you use splines to begin with. So I think we're done with accessories. And now I want to move to another aspect of our simulation system, which is plastic deformations. And this is, you know, it's something that sounds quite simple, but allows you to do amazing stuff. Let me set it up by creating, and I'm doing everything from scratch so you can see how simple it is. I'm creating a ground plane. Now, this is going to be a collider. So I'm going to right click it from the simulation menu. I'm actually going to bring this simulation. There you go. Just going to have it here so I can use it. So I'm going to set this as a collider. Now there is a little detail in our point-based particle system which sounds counterintuitive, but this is how it works. If you want your simulation to run more efficiently, your colliders need to have a quite dense point mesh, because although you may assume that the fewer points we have, the easier the simulation is, and that, as far as the cloth is concerned, that is correct. When it comes to collisions, the way surfaces are defined for collisions, if we're putting too few points, then the engine needs to search further for points to define the colliding surface. So, can I throw this away? It's annoying me. I'm like an old grumpy cat. Random things just annoy me. So, by increasing the point count, it doesn't need to be enormous. It just has to be pretty close to the other objects, all right? So, it just runs a bit more efficiently, and the overhead is not that big. Especially in this case, it's a procedural object. It won't make your file much larger. What I like to do is make this a bit larger, and then let's hide it. I just need it as a collider. Now the next thing is I want a cube, because everyone wants a cube. And I'm going to go and set this to 50, 50, and 50, and just raise it, let's say 26, so it's slightly above the ground. Let's add some subdivisions, because this is going to be our plastic object. So 10, 10, 10 is good enough. I'm going to set this to be a cloth object, and by default it's going to do its little jello motion and all that. Excellent, because it has quite a bit of bendiness, which allows the edges to fall in, to fold. And if you want more details on that, check the first tutorial. But I do promise that over the next month or so, I'm going to do a very detailed tutorial on simulations, explaining everything in high detail. So let's do this again. We're going to have a jello. There you go, jello. And the other component is I'm going to create a nice little sphere. Now let's make this a hexahedron, because it's all quads. Let's make it nice and small, lift it up, and I'm going to place it there we go, right here. And right click, set this to cloth as well, and set this to 0 as well. So now we have a jello ball falling on a jello cube. Always rewind if you want your simulation to play. So there we go. That's what we have. We have a jello ball falling on a jello cube. And you can see that by definition, the cloth object wants to retain its original shape. It doesn't, and this is the epitome of an elastic deformation. But we have plastic deformations over here. So I'm going to go to the cube actually, open the plastic deformation. The plastic deformation can work under the influence of the bending or the influence of the stretching, or both. All I have to do here is say I want the object to retain its deformed state after the collision, both using bend and using stretch. Why? Because that's what I want to do. And watch this now. It retains the shape. So this allows us, and we can control it, we can change the strength, we can tell it to deform only. So what these numbers mean is that bend, deform, past in degrees means that when the two polygons, actually it's the constraints, right? I showed in the first presentation, but let's simplify it and say when the polygons bend more than 10 degrees of their original position, take that as a plastic deformation, because there are objects which can bounce, but if you hit them too hard, then they become plastic. And the same for the stretch deform. When the deformation passes the 150% of their original length, that's when it's going to hold its shape. And we have hardening and all that. What the amazing thing about these parameters is that you can drop vertex maps. You can go and art direct which parts of your cloth are going to receive how much of whatever we're doing. The depth in the system and the control is absolutely amazing. So one thing I haven't done yet, and I want to do, is I think you can make a car crash. You can make two objects crash into each other and retain their deformation and all that. I'm sure you can put things together that look really fancy, but the process of making them is fairly simple. So that's all I have to say about plastic deformations. The penultimate thing I'm going to talk about is tearing. Now, has anyone ever used the old cloth system in Cinema 4D? Anyone? Anyone? Right. One of the limitations of that system was that tearing was done using an enormous hack. And the hack was when a polygon became larger than a certain threshold, Cinema 4D would hide it. So if you create a cloth in the old system with tearing, and you use a cloner to clone things on it, you will see those things cloning even on the invisible polygons. And that was done so that the mesh, the simulated mesh, would retain its topological integrity. Because if you remove polygons, you change point numbers and polygon numbers, therefore you create inconsistency in the topology. Alas, the magnificent developers at Maxon have solved this problem with a new cloth engine, and we have proper structure, proper tearing that retains the topological integrity of the object. Let's make an exploding pumpkin, or watermelon, or anything you want. So let's get a hexahedron. I'm going to sort of increase the density a bit, and I'm going to make it editable. And what I'm going to do is right click here and say I want to add a vertex map. Now let me add it here. I'm going to use it in a second. I'm going to set this up so that it's a cloth object. If I press play, it's just going to fall down, nothing else. I don't want it to fall down, and I'm just going to remove from my settings my gravity. Right, this is one of many setups you can do. So now it's going to do absolutely nothing. So you can do this if you want to do absolutely nothing. I want this to get a force that's pushing the points outwards. Now, most users have been using from the forces an attractor, because all the forces work, well, most of the forces work with our new simulation system. I don't like the attractor because there are many things you cannot control. It always attracts in one point, or it repulses from one point. I like to use a field force because I can sculpt where the forces are going. And there's a very, very simple thing. Let me just hide this. You can do in the field force inside here, you add fields and it creates forces that are pointing from the larger value to the smaller value, or the opposite. I don't remember. So the higher to the lower, or lower to the higher. You can always go here and change direction. I'm going to show you in a second. I'm going to create a spherical field because that is what makes these vectors, these forces, point to the center. I'm going to set this to set absolute velocity. So the whole of the field force is going to apply those vectors, those forces, to everything it encounters. And let me make this 20 and we'll see what happens. Now, with this here and this here, we should see something happening. So you can see it's going inwards now, everything towards the center. All I have to do is take the spherical field, go to the direction, and invert the direction. So by definition, we go outwards in towards the center. Now we're going to go from inside outwards. Now, why isn't it doing anything? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, it doesn't have enough force. It's trying to do it. What's holding it together? Well, it's the bendiness and the stretchiness. We have zero stretchiness, so it's not going to stretch. So don't forget, if you want things to sort of tear, you need to, and if you go to tearing, you would see that the tearing is a percentage. That means it has to do with the stretching of the object, of the cloth. If there's no stretchiness, it's very hard to tear. So let's go and set this to 20, and let's do that. Let's see if it's going to tear. I have to turn it on. Let's see, is it going to tear? It's trying to. It's trying to. Tear past 101. Let's see first of all if this is going to work. There you go. So it's tearing now. 1% more stretching than what we wanted, and it's going to tear. Good, good. Let's go to 115, and let's go to our field force, and I think it's normalize what I need to do. Yes, it's normalize. So now we have that force pushing from the center of the sphere and tearing everything apart. The great thing about this is because it's a field, I can move it around. I can make things push upwards. So I can use multiple fields. So I can sculpt my force without being constrained to one specific type. And you can do all that within one force. If I add a linear field, it's going to push them in one way. If I add a cylindrical field, it's going to push them this way and that way and whatnot. So, good. So I'm happy with this, but there's one little thing I want to change. I want to be able to tear, I can hide this, we don't need to see it. I want to tear my sphere in very specific points. I want to draw, I want to art direct how this is going to tear. Because, you know, if it's a banana, it will open like this. So let's go and do that. This is where my vertex map comes into play. So with 0, red is 0, I'm going to double click here and I'm going to start painting. So let's just paint. I'm going to do it very, very roughly. I need to keep track of time. And let's go around. So we're just painting values on the points now, nothing else. Good. And I have this, which I'm going to name it. Always get in the habit of naming selections, vertex maps, and so forth, for very good reason. Which camera is looking at me now? For very good reason. So let's call this tearing. And we are going to go back to object mode, make sure I select my cloth tag, and say, I can get rid of these, but I can say that the tearing past is going to be controlled by this. It gives us a minimum tear, so don't tear anything that is stretching up to 20%, and this value needs to be a bit lower than the other one. So I don't want to tear anything up to 5% more than its length. I want to start tearing when things are about 20% longer, the stretchiness of each and every one of the constraints. And look at that. I'm actually controlling where this is tearing. I didn't put too much attention into painting, so a lot of these are going to detach, but you do get the idea. So by making sure that you have nice topology that goes down the lines you want to tear, and by pointing those, making those points the value you want, you can tear this either in very specific places or staggered. I want this to tear first because it has a higher value. I want that to tear second, it has a slightly lower value, and so forth. So the amount of art direction you can do here is absolutely amazing. Now, the one little thing I'm going to say about this, final thing, is that if you do not want to paint your vertices, you can always go and use fields for your vertices. And you can say, here it is. So this now, this vertex map, whatever I'm trying to do here, is going to define how this is going to work. So I can make this smaller. I can go to my field list. I can go to my remapping, and I can say, okay, I'm going to do a contour mode curve, and then down here I'm going to say reset to make it linear. I'm going to pull this here and add another point here. So now I've defined manually a center line down which it should tear. And at any point you can say, I want it a bit sideways. Well, get your linear field and rotate it that way, and now it's going to tear over there. So the amount of control and the ease of use you have to control these otherwise very complex effects, it's outstanding because the field system is fully integrated in our simulation via vertex maps. So let me show you that it's surface stable, which was my original point, and I got carried away. Yeah, I've been using this for a long time and I still get excited. I don't apologize. All right, so let's do a quick test because there's something I need to tell you about this. I'm going to select the sphere. I'm going to go to my simulate. I'm going to go to my hair object and add some hair. Let's make the hair a bit smaller. And I think this is enough hair. I get triggered by hair. I do not know why. That's a different story. Now, there's one thing you need to remember about applying things on surfaces, especially hair. Currently, we're using polygon vertex. That's a default way of putting hair on an object. The vertex count changes. The polygon count doesn't change. So make sure you go on polygon center to apply that hair, and when you tear this, you can see the hair stays with the cloth. We couldn't do this previously. This is a major, well, we could do it if you followed one of my tutorials, which was extremely hard to follow and it needed a lot of things, but this simplicity, it's a new thing and it's part of the huge advantages our system offers. So just because we're here and because we can do it, and I'm going to just create a cloner with a sphere. I'm going to make the sphere icosahedron because not many people can say that word. I am Greek. I can say Greek words. I'm going to put it here and set it to polygon center. Ooh, too many of these, but who cares? I'm going to make it a multi-instance and make this nice and tiny. So now you will see the spheres are stuck on your mesh. No more flickering, no more. So imagine what, you know, the avenues this opens in this particular case. Surface stable. I don't know. I'm going to try something. It may not work. I'm going to go surface. See what happens here. Is it going to flicker around? No, they're stable. Yep. We just have that 1 frame delay because we haven't said simulate before generators. For anyone that didn't watch the first one, shall I say it? Or shall I tell people, no, go watch the first presentation? Let me think. I'm going to show it. Simulate before generators in the project settings simulation, and this should resolve this particular problem. So I can go here, I can increase my count. It's multi-instances, so I can do as many as I want. And there you go. Not bad. Who didn't like this? And the way I'm phrasing the question like that, no one wants to be singled out as the person that raises their hand. Whereas if I said, who liked that, I would miss that one person. Simon, I can see you. Okay, this is what I have to say about tearing. Good. So this is a dinosaur, right? This is an alembic. Does anyone remember the title of my presentation? Past, present, future simulations. So this is an alembic dinosaur. It's part of our asset manager. If you type here Rex, you will see our lovely T-Rex over here. I've baked it as an alembic file. One of the intrinsic issues with cloth simulations is that, as I explained in my first presentation, the structure of your cloth object is based only on the surface. There's absolutely no consideration about what's inside the object. Therefore, if you want to give it some structure, some internal matter, as stiff as you make the surface, it's just like making a paper sphere. You can always crush it. In order for something not to crush, it needs some sort of medium inside. And this is a well-known issue with cloth simulations. So if I were to take my dinosaur, I'm going to add a floor. I'm going to do the things I need to do, put it down, increase count, hide it, and make it a collider. So it's in the simulation tag. So I'm going to make it a collider object. And I'm going to go to this body here and make it a cloth object. So this is the result of getting a cloth object that you want it to have substance. So one of the things our amazing developers are working on at Maxon is a way to solve this problem by creating an internal structure this internal structure is what we call poles. These allow the object to retain part of its volume. Now I can change, just like everything else, I can change the softness, I can change. A pole is a new type of constraint that gives an object the appearance of it being full of an elastic medium. Now, we have many other things I will not talk about right now, but this begs the following question. How do I use that and still have my dinosaur walking? Because remember, this guy walks. And this is something that's very much necessary when you're doing complex simulations. You want to allow a duality of art directability in terms of animation and simulation at the same time. You have cells that are pulsating and you want them to move the other ones next to them. You want your Jello dinosaur to walk. You know, everyone that has a child knows the beauty of watching a child walk and stand. And this is me and my dinosaur, okay? So they've added one more thing called the mix animation. And mix animation is magical. I don't know how it works, but it works. You just click this button here, nothing else. Forget about what else you see. Just erase it from your memories. Just look into the light. Look into the light. So, and now we have a dinosaur that is trying to walk at the same time. So let's do some adjustments and have some fun at the expense of dinosaurs. They're dead anyway, who cares, right? You know, too bad, dinosaurs. So let's make this less soft. Let's go and add a few more of these. Look at all these things happening in here. I'm going to change some settings, add a few more of these. I'm putting more structure, right? I'm putting the ability for the object to hold its shape better. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put outside as well. You know, with my ears, they're too floppy. When I'm on my motorbike, they flap. Whereas if I had trusses, they wouldn't. So I'm adding trusses. So this is just a small part of the whole thing. Watch this. That was my friend Chris last night when he came back to the hotel. He drank too much. So as you can see, and I think that I'm not going to say much more. Actually, I'm going to say one more thing. One more thing, just because it's fun. I'm going to take our little dinosaur here. I'm going to make copies of our little dinosaur here. Now, if you want to clone things, I'm going to show you how you can do that. I'm going to go and move this dinosaur up, maybe rotate him a bit, add, let's say, 4 dinosaurs. Get this, raise it above the ground. Good. And let's put the simulation on the cloner. And we're going to see that we have a lot of dinosaurs falling on each other. While all the MoGraph components of this are still active, I can go and change their color. Random effector, set the random effector to be in effector color. Go set, always do this, go set the min to 0, otherwise it makes dark colors. Now we have random colored dinosaurs falling on each other. I mean, that tops the whole thing. And I think with this, I'm going to close up my presentation and open to questions. I will not answer any questions about anything I've shown you in the last 10 minutes. I will happily take the 5th. But for anything else, I will try my best. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Things are coming. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please, any questions? Simon, that was your cue. Thank you. That was your cue to start clapping.
I have a question about the last 10 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Was that new stuff you weren't supposed to show?
Yeah, but I told you I'm going to go rebel.
Come on in.
They're working very hard. I mean, when I say, I'm not just saying that, I'm personally involved with the team that is doing that stuff. One of them was with us these days, and it's absolutely amazing the amount of work and research they're doing. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what they're... I mean, we've tied them down with shackles and chains, right? They're not going anywhere.
We did actually have one question.
Yes,
somebody was
yeah.
asking, when you were doing the sphere, when you were doing tearing it, imagine you wanted to peel a banana. Could you do it one section at a time, one piece at a time like that?
Okay, let me see how I can answer that. You will be able to do things like that using what I showed you, the mix animation. It had some other modes there,
Okay.
which I hope you forgot. But
Good question then.
yeah. It's the whole thing. It's layered in a way where every new feature doesn't just double the power. It's exponential because you can do many more things. And believe me, there's some surprises. I wish I could show them. It's like there some things are happening that are giving me goosebumps, which relate not only to simulations, right? They can be used in simulations extremely well. Anyway,
It's all good. Any questions out physical audience? No? Any more online?
No, that was it.
Oh my goodness, we're at like about 12 minutes to the end of the show.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Great
It was my pleasure.
presentation.
I
Fun
love
stuff.
showing the great work that they're doing, the development team and the design team and everyone else.
Oh, we actually have a question. Yes.
Yes, please.
Such as that, is there a way to add a secondary level of detail to the torn edge? More detail?
So the question was...
Go ahead.
The question was, when you're tearing an object, is there a second level of tearing you can add to that?
We do have one coming on the chat.
Well, so more detailed tearing. That's why I said you have to be careful with your topology. So when you're modeling an object, if you're going to do some art directable tearing, it's good to have an edge that runs close to that. Because imagine if you have sideways polygons like I did, you're going to get those edges. You can't cut anything else other than an edge. So when you're modeling, draw some lines with a knife, cut it where you want it, and set those lines to be part of your vertex map to control that. But a combination of the mesh density, you can go and increase the density where you want the tearing to become, so the cut is less apparent. So there are many ways you can combine these to make it work the way you want. But yeah, the arc directability is amazing. Please. If you can render, the question is, can you render this in Redshift? Oh. No. So the question was if we can use the Redshift subdivision to subdivide the model. No, because that happens at render time and is totally after everything else is executed in the scene.
Simulation.
But using our own subdivision surface object does exactly the same thing in the context of your object manager. So instead of, this is one way, if you want to do subdivision at render time, you can use the Redshift tag and subdivide at render time. It's very economical. Everything happens on the GPU. But if you need the mesh for Cinema 4D to do calculations, it has to be done using a subdivision surface object because it's based on the literal mesh you have over here.
There was another question. Instead of using fields, they were wondering if there was how you would approach it if you wanted to use something like an emitter to punch holes, using particles to punch holes through the object.
Yes, fields. Because you use the particle, you drop it in. Let me show that in case people don't know it.
Very cool.
So just a very simple setup here, because people do not understand that fields work with everything. Like literally everything. So let me try this. I'm going to very quickly make a matrix object because it's simple. Let's make an emitter. So the emitter now is emitting particles. Good. These green particles here. There we go. And I want these green particles to be the things that are going to change the positions of the points. So what I'm going to do is tell the matrix I'm going to drag the easiest field, the plane field. And in the plane field, I'm going to drop in the field, plane effector, sorry, I'm going to drag the emitter. And it's a particle object. And now when these particles Go. So if you want to read particle data and transfer it to something else, all you have to do is pipe those particles through a field list, and there you go. Now, what exactly it's doing, in this particular case, it's taking the radius of the particles, and it's doing this. You can make it, you can draw lines using a tracer, and use the lines in the field.
Cool.
Yeah, we can sit here for, you know, the extended future until I retire, which is never, and talk about these things. But go to Cineversity, go on Maxon's YouTube channel, Red Giant YouTube channel, ZBrush YouTube channel, 3D Motion Show, and if you have questions, send it to training@maxon.net.
There you go. That's awesome. That was the fastest, easiest answer I've seen. Yeah, we will take all the presentations from the show. We will try to get them in the archive as soon as possible. Did you have another one?
No.
Okay. We'll try to get those in the archives as soon as possible. Hopefully next week they'll be up. So if you missed one of these presentations, you can catch it on the 3D Motion Show. And you actually illustrated why we need a better events page on the site, because there's too many places to go. So we need to consolidate that into one lovely little channel
Soon.
place. Soon, yeah. Okay, I'll get on that. Thanks everybody for coming to see the show. Thanks interwebs for tuning in. Thank you, Mr. Noseman.
Always my
Awesome
pleasure.
stuff.
Paul.
Thank you,
Always my
Simon.
pleasure. Thank you so much. You make it worth it, right? That's the whole thing.
And don't forget to be checking out all the webinars that Simon and his team are doing on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. We will be streaming from IBC in September, and then the next months after that.